All right. Welcome back to the Lead Counsel Podcast. This is your host, Tona. I'm here with Jules and our guest of the day, Craig Goldenfarb. What's going on, guys?
How are you? Doing great, Tom.
Awesome. Jules, how you doing?
I'm doing good. Welcome back. This is now your third time on the podcast, right, Craig?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, you got to start paying me, Tom.
Listen, I'm paying you by having you on and promoting what today's show is about. So I have been in kind of the blessed space of knowing Craig for gotta be almost 10, 12 years now, right, Craig?
Definitely over a decade.
Over a decade. And I was talking to Glenn Gutek about it when we had Glenn on the show and how we started out the practice growth program and then boom, right into DYM together with Craig and a bunch of people that it was like a powerhouse group out of Dallas. And Craig is running a multiple 8-figure law firm. And by the way, let me digress right out of the gate. So you opened up your office to me, James Joseph, and a bunch of other people when we were down in Florida for... What were we down in Florida for,
I
Craig?
think it was a mastermind. It was John Fisher's mastermind.
For John Fisher's mastermind. And it was late at night. I was exhausted, but we ended up going after dinner. And man, for anybody that's down in the area where Craig's office is, which is West Palm, right, Craig?
Right. Palm Beach County, Florida. Yep.
Palm Beach County. If you can score a tour of his office, I always knew you were a player, Craig, but then I walked into your office and I was like, God almighty, I got a lot of work to do. Like, I started questioning whether I even wanted what that stress level would look like at that point. Like James and I kept saying, man, this is just overwhelming. The number of conference rooms, TV monitors with all the statistics on it. And it definitely puts things in a lot of perspective in terms of the levels of play going on. So I'll ask you at the end, but I have no doubt you'll end up doing 9 figures in that law firm eventually.
Probably.
It was just too overwhelming for me to process everything in the one visit. But if anybody's down your way, if you can score a tour of the Gold Law offices, man, it was just something to behold. Really.
Anybody's welcome. I love to host people and show them around.
Yeah. So one, I'm proud of you as a friend. Like I've known you a very long time. And just to see what you've built is really just a testament to your discipline, emotional growth, all of that stuff. Like you really are firing on all 8 cylinders. It was just really something to behold. Everything from your conference rooms to your reception area and all the 5 senses being in the reception area. It was just really something special.
Thanks, Tom. That's very humbling. Very, very nice.
So let's talk about the 7-Figure Attorney Summit because you've kind of turned me into a mastermind junkie at this point. And I travel all over the country and I do these masterminds. And I've been attending yours, I think, since the first one you ever did. I think I missed one. I'm sad to say that as phenomenal as it is, this year it's overlapping for me with EOS, and I had already committed to EOS. So I won't be there in March. But one, what was the purpose for you of creating the 7-Figure Attorney Summit?
Well, I found that because I'm mainly a businessman now and not an attorney, I saw a lot of my friends in the legal industry across the country struggling to develop skills that they were never taught. And those skills are skills of leadership, skills of business, skills of how to grow organizations, even basic skills like making a budget, which lawyers don't do, and stuff that's so basic if you get a business degree or if you start a sneaker store selling sneakers, but they don't teach it in law school or medical school because they just teach you your craft. And if you just learn your craft, that's great. You become a good craftsman. But that doesn't mean you're necessarily going to be successful financially because you're a good craftsman. And most lawyers are very good craftsmen at their craft, but they have absolutely no idea how to make a viable office. And because I recognized that I was a better businessman than I ever was a lawyer, I love helping people make some sort of transition to at least establishing a second skill set. And that's the skill set of being a leader, a better person, and a business person. So that's where it started.
That's awesome. And I will say that as somebody who's attended everyone, and we did Atticus together, and I do John Fisher's mastermind. And there's ones that it's not negotiable. I never miss. And this is my first time not being able to make yours or John's. But I will tell you that the way you do it is so different from what John does and from all the other offerings in the marketplace. And I think that you perfectly niched it as well, because like there's some heavy trial summits, right? And then there's some heavy 8-figure summits out there, but you have really positioned it of like right around that 7-figure mark. Either you're closing in on it or you just broke the 7-figure mark and then you want to go to the next levels, right? The multiple 7-figure marks. I find that fantastic. Is that actually the target audience, or is it people that are looking to get to 7?
I think that once you're around $1 million, and I'd also say about 6 to 10 staff, you have a fork in the road. And the fork in the road is where you've got to choose. Do you want to continue to be a craftsman and an attorney, or do you want to grow your business larger and make more money, but also shift what you do for a living? And that goes really internal and deep, that decision. And I want to be at that decision point for people, because if their decision is that they want to stay being a craftsman and an attorney, and that's right for them, that's great. I want to help them decide that they want to continue to be a craftsman. And if they want to take the opposite approach and become a business person and run a business, then I can guide them through that process too. So I kind of want to be their guide in making that really important decision, which occurs between 6 and 10 employees and about $1 million in revenue for a personal injury firm. And it's almost like I'm their therapist, because I can help them look inside and figure out their identity and figure out which direction they want to take. And whichever direction they want to take, I say that's got to be the direction that's going to make you happy the rest of your life.
I think that's awesome. I was talking to somebody today on a coaching call, and the person was talking to me about, hey, I'm interested in coaching, and they were right around that $1 million mark. And what kept coming up was the topic of fear. They must have used the word fear 5 times in that one call. And I said, well, you're at a crossroads, similar to what you just said. You're at a crossroads where you can't fear X, Y, and Z. X being people disappointing you, or fear letting go of control, and build. So you either have to choose your desire to build is greater than your need to feel in control over situations that scare you, or stay a solopreneur or have like a small office, 1 attorney and 5, 7 staff, or you're going to have to let go past the $1 million mark to then grow and scale a business.
Yeah, fear is the main blockade at that step. And, just like in a fork in the road, when you're facing that proverbial fork, you're scared of making the wrong decision because you have a decision to make. And the only thing that's preventing you on taking one path or the other is fear. And you've nailed it. It's the fear of delegation, the fear of letting go, the fear of control, the fear of failure. These are all fears. So every part of business growth for me involves a new challenge involving fear. And so each stage, I talk about 5 stages of law firm growth at my seminar, and each stage brings a different type of risk and a different type of fear. And in order to be able to identify those and work through those is what allows a person to progress, not only as a person, but as a business person.
Please tell me you're recording this so that I can get access to the video at some point. Please tell me you're going to fully. I saw that on the agenda, and I want to go through the agenda and the speakers with you, but please tell me that somehow, some way I'll be able to access video of this. Are you going to record it?
We're recording it in-house with my videographer. So the answer is yes, and we'll give you $10 off the recording price.
Listen,
you get it. It's yours.
You're the best. Use our code.
Yeah. Well, I'll use the code.
That's great. Tona, cheap Tona hashtag.
So just for anybody that's listening to this, you made it 10 minutes in. We're going to be doing a code at the end that gives you a pretty significant savings on the already ridiculously reasonable price that Craig charges for the 1 day. And my recommendation would be that you book Craig's and John's back to back. Don't even hesitate. The amount of value that Craig and John both deliver in 2 days is ridiculous. There's no amount of squabbling over, hey, am I going to get this cheaper or whatever? And Craig's been gracious enough that anybody that's listening to the podcast will get a discount code that offers pretty significant savings. So let's talk really quick about the agenda, right? You've got yourself speaking with the opening and how to build up a referral portfolio. You've got Michelle Winfrey on hiring, employee management, and payroll software. So let's talk about Michelle for a second. Give me a little history on how you found Michelle, how long she's been with you, and why she's such a cornerstone of both your office and the 7-figure attorney mastermind.
I hired Michelle 12 years ago, and I was looking for, at that time, a glorified office manager. I was probably 20 or 30 staff at the time. And I needed someone who could also do some administrative work, some work perhaps in the finance or overseeing finance, and then office services, because I didn't have those separate departments yet within my company. So I found her from Disney World. She was in HR at Disney World. If you ever want someone really trained well in HR, my gosh, that company is amazing in how they talk about employee satisfaction. And there's actually the Disney Institute itself sells a program for tens of thousands of dollars to train companies on HR. So I ended up getting that for free because I stole one of their employees. So one of the first things she said 12 years ago was, you know how Disney World's motto is the happiest place on earth? And I said, yeah. And she said, well, how about we make this the happiest place on earth to work? And I said, wow, that's pretty cool. That's a good mission statement for your department. And I said, what's that going to take? And she said, well, it's going to take some money. And I said, okay, I can devote that. And I said, well, why is it worth my money? And then she started to produce some research on how turnover costs money, which I knew, but I'd never actually read anything on it. And then I was like, oh my God, turnover costs a tremendous amount of money. And she said, Craig, I'm going to get your turnover way down because we're going to make this a really great place to work. And as a business person at the time, I was thinking, okay, so she just proved her theory by showing if I could reduce my turnover, I could make more money and have better employees and happier employees. And then she reached into my heart, which was that I always knew I wanted to have a place where everybody wanted to come to work. And she said, I can make that happen, Craig, because I've already been taught these skills. So she said, Craig, if you give me the resources and the money and the time, I'm going to make this a place where everybody wants to beg to work here.
That's
and I
amazing.
said, that's a beautiful, beautiful vision, Michelle. Let's do it. And that was 12 years ago. And what's interesting is 3 years ago, she was still running HR. So she was culture and HR. And she came to me and she was working still like 60 hours a week, working too much. And she has a teenage daughter. And she said, how about, Craig, if we split up HR as one department and I hire an HR manager, Craig, and you let me take over culture? And I said, so you're going to be in charge not of HR anymore? And she said, nope, I'm going to be in charge of making sure your employees are happy. That's it. I'm going to narrow my own job and I'm going to be the queen of culture here. And I need to take this other employee and have him work with me. And he's a guy who's already been in culture with me. So we split up HR and culture. And a lot of companies are like, oh, wow, I never thought of splitting those two departments. And she said, it's good cop, bad cop, Craig, because HR is often bad cop.
Right.
They're enforcing regulations and rules and vacation and sick time and enforcing things. So they could be viewed as bad cop and discipline. But what if culture was only good cop? And I said, wow, that's a really interesting distinction. You got it. So I gave Michelle, she's now CCO, Chief Culture Officer. So she's employee happiness. Her mission statement is happiest place on earth to work. And she's in charge of employee happiness. And she has a staff member under her. So they're full-time in charge of everything, making games and contests and competitions and giveaways and just all this fun stuff that she does. And she has a full-time employee working for her. But what she's speaking on at the seminar is her old job, which is how she managed a great software company called Paylocity and how good they are at a full-service HR management, not just like Paychex or ADP, which are kind of minor in what they do and limited in their platform. So we're really a big fan of Paylocity and what they provide for us. So she's going to be talking about HR processes and how we use Paylocity to maximize those processes.
And it's funny that you brought that up because I'm going to tell you how much a believer I am in what you do and how you do it. I came home from one of your seminars and I heard Michelle speaking on remote work and Ring Central and on Paylocity as a robust HR platform. I literally came back, scrapped my entire phone system, moved over to Ring Central, and we put together a hybrid program, actual real written program. And then we moved over to Paylocity as well. Because one of the things that you afford people, and I've kind of adopted this model in what I do, is you give away everything, right? You give away tremendous value to those of us that are on the same journey, just years or brackets of revenue behind you. And it shortcuts the process. You were like, look, my entire team did a study on platforms for payroll. This was the best one. I just saved 6 months of analyzing that stuff, came back and said, we're moving over to Paylocity. Right?
Yeah, I think I'm so lucky that I just form candidates form an exploratory committee. So I form all these committees to vet vendors. And then they come to me and they do a presentation and it ends up costing me 1 hour of my time because all I have to do is sit through their presentation. So the committee does it. They spend dozens of hours vetting different vendors. And then they come to me with a recommendation and they're usually spot on. And I have a few questions and I didn't have to do any of the vetting. And if I can give that gift to other attorneys, that if you're looking for a VA company and my firm has vetted 10 of them, and here's the one we use, then it just saved you all that vetting, and you're probably going with one that's pretty decent because my firm vetted it. And I don't always get it right, nor do my committees. But they put in a lot of time vetting all these different companies, and they know what information I need. So I like to give that up.
Yeah, and it's awesome. You share all of this in 8 hours straight? What you do?
Yeah,
it's like 8 to 5.
One day. Yeah.
Yeah. And there's networking and stuff too, but for anybody that hasn't attended it, you do not realize the world that it will open up. I mean, one of the things that you provide, whether it's for people in the law or not, is because it's the same struggles, whether they're in the law or they're a law firm vendor and they're at different stages of their law firm vendor business. They would still benefit from being at your seminar because it's the same struggles. At some point, you go from technician to entrepreneur. You want to know what you're getting into. And for many people, the first exposure that they've had to that entrepreneurial space in law firm ownership is seeing what you have built, right?
Yeah,
opening that up. That alone has value in it. Right.
Yeah, it's just realizing what's out there as far as growing a business and what you could be at some stage, or even if you want to grow from just $1 million to 2 million. I mean, that's 2 times growth. That's amazing. Or if you want to go to 20 million or 50 million, whatever stage of growth you're at, it doesn't really matter. It just takes different skills and getting over fear.
And that's just it. Like you talk about all of these different things. And I also know you've done a ton of work on yourself, right? With the meditation week that you spent at,
Awesome.
silent retreat, right?
Oh boy. Yeah.
Yeah. And I love that stuff, but it's just, you've opened up a world to people that, think about when you and I came up, Craig, we didn't have access to any of this. It was all guesswork. I mean, you had some really strong mentorship, but overall, I didn't have any of this. Like, that's why I think I absorbed so much of it now, because so much of it was trial, error, mistakes, all of that stuff that I've been able to shortcut so many steps in the growth process that, again, that's why I tend to go to all of these that you and John have back to back.
It's so easy. You can hack stuff. You can hack the speed of growth these days because there's so much information out there. And the lawyers who are so insulated and think they know stuff, it's just like funny, because even at my level, I like to be the smallest fish in some of the masterminds I'm in. And right. I'm a multiple 8-figure firm, and I'm in masterminds where I'm the smallest law firm in there. And I'm so humbled by the fact that I'm even in the room. So I always like to be in ponds where I'm the medium fish, the small fish, the large fish. I like to vary the ponds that I swim in, because you get a different experience at each type of group, and it reflects differently upon you, and you reflect differently in each type of group. So what a rich life it is if you can swim in different ponds.
Yeah, and I've always espoused that. I love being the smaller guy in the pond. But what I'm finding too is, like, the more I hang out with people like you or Seth, you're running these multiple 8-figure firms. All of a sudden now, I've had 3 conversations this week with 9-figure law firm owners, right? So that you start to see the levels out there and you go, oh, listen, I'm watching what these people are doing and I'm seeing what they're doing. And it's all achievable, right? Like, you worked really hard for the last 25 years to build the business that you have in the law firm you have. And I don't know, it's just a thing of beauty to watch from the outside, and going back to the agenda, right? And the speakers you have. You didn't start out with a Michelle Winfrey, but you also know the gold mine you have in a Michelle Winfrey. And I think at one time you said, my job is to say yes to everything Michelle wants.
Yeah. Yeah,
right?
It's true.
Because
she
knows
up with the great stuff.
Yeah. And she knows so much about her job. So then one of the other speakers that you have is Mike Wells, who I know is your chief marketing officer. Give us a little background on Mike and his journey to you and what he's done since you, because I've seen a tremendous shift in your marketing as well.
Yeah. So Mike is a branding expert. And what's ironic is that you and I are both in Atticus, and Mike used to run the marketing for Atticus. So I had the uncomfortable situation of poaching an employee from a coaching company that I've been loyal to for over 20 years. So Mike was a little bit stagnant, I guess you could say, in Atticus. And I'm a super aggressive marketer, and Atticus is not. And he was feeling a little stagnant. And what's really funny is that he approached me to be my headhunter to find a marketing director. So I paid him upfront fee to be a headhunter. He presented me 4 or 5 candidates, and we interviewed them together on Zoom. And as we were doing the interviews, It's like, that girl you're friends with in high school for like 3 years and you're really close. And then after 3 years, you realize, man, we should date.
Right.
Well, after the fifth interview of somebody lesser than Mike, we looked at each other like on the Zoom, and all of a sudden we were like, we should date. And I said, Mike, have you ever thought of moving? He was in St. Louis and I'm in Florida. And I was like, hey, dude, did you ever think that we've now spent hours and hours together interviewing candidates who we don't like? Have you ever thought of moving from St. Louis and taking the job yourself? And he was like, hey, maybe we should date.
Right.
So
That's
I
awesome.
said, hey, dude, let's set up an interview like where I'm interviewing you. And all of a sudden our mind transferred and I started interviewing him for the job, and it ended up that he moved with a significant other to Florida and took the job a few years ago. And he's now been elevated to chief marketing officer. We also have a marketing director below him. So he's now got a staff of almost 10 people below him. So that was his interesting journey. He went from a headhunter to the leading candidate. And now he's been my chief marketing officer for a while now. So kind of funny how I found him.
And you said you've built out that whole marketing team under him. Did you already have that marketing team before he came in?
No, what's interesting is I had like 3 people and it was disjointed in its structure. And once I got into EOS, I became better at structure of the different departments. So we started to identify the different needs within marketing. And you can divide up any department into the different needs. So we thought, okay, so we've got graphic design, you've got content writing, you've got social media, you've got videography, you've got brand, you've got TV, billboards, you've got all these different tasks or categories, buckets of skill sets. And then we had to design, you've got community relations and you've got client relations. I just named about 10 different buckets right there. Right. And then you have to design different job descriptions based on who can handle what. So we realized that a lot of those fall under the term digital director. So everything SEO, pay-per-click, website, social media has a digital component. So what we realized in analyzing this department was that you can hire someone who's an expert in digital, and digital can handle maybe 5 of those buckets I just said. So we hired someone from a Fortune 500 company who ran their digital. And she's amazing, and she's very expensive, but she runs everything digital. Now, Mike, being a marketer, has some of those skill sets, but he can't guarantee that I'm number 1 on Google Verified because he's not a digital expert. But Jody, my digital director, I beat Morgan & Morgan in Palm Beach County as far as Google Verified because she's so good. That's amazing. So she comes in with all my LSA and stuff that I don't even know what it stands for. Everything digital, pay-per-click, and that, people say, "Who's your SEO company?" I'm like, I don't know.
Well, that's what I was just going to ask you. I got to jump in because, man, you do this all the time, man. You spitting knowledge at a rate I can't even process as fast as you're spitting it out, which is why I asked you about recordings. I was just about to ask you. So it sounds like you're handling SEO and LSA in-house.
Yeah. My digital director handles everything that you would think falls under digital. And she also has social media background. So she manages my 2-person social media team because there's an element of digital to that. Now, she's not great in creating TikTok videos, but my social media team is. So they can create it. They can use a Philippines VA to edit it, a graphic designer VA to put in the graphics, none of which I would have a clue how to do any of this stuff. And then they can design other stuff on Canva. And, you asked me this stuff 2 years ago, I wouldn't have been able to say half the words I just said. Right. Still, I only know it because I have to write checks addressed to Canva. Right. Still don't know what it is. But I've hired the team where each of them can supervise someone below them who's even more skilled at that micro area. So we've got a full-time videographer, a full-time social media team, and digital manager manages that. So then we've got all our print ads and our newsletter and our marketing and branding, and that's managed by Mike. And then we've got a community relations person who manages sponsorships and events. That's all they manage. So that's a different skill set, which is managing sponsorships, events, and seminars. And then we have a client relations director who doesn't fall under legal. She falls under marketing because a client relations director actually is a marketer because she does have to know enough about the law to explain things to clients. So she used to work in legal, but she was on the phone too much with clients. So we thought, hey, let's move you into marketing and client relations because you love talking to clients, but you don't love working on your damn cases. So we don't need you to work on cases. We want you to make clients happy. So you're going to be in client relations. So all these 10 people fall under marketing, and now they each have their individual skill sets. It's just like a sports team. You win as a team, and the running back has different skill sets than the wide receiver and the quarterback. And that's why structure and using EOS and having someone come in and kind of analyze your structure. And if you don't have that skill set yourself, that's why you might use an EOS coach to come in and say, you don't have a running back.
Right,
Your
right,
team's
right,
good,
right,
but
right.
you don't have a tailback, or you don't have a center or a left tackle. And you're like, what's a left tackle? You've never heard of that before. So my US coach came in many, many years ago and said, you don't have a COO. And I was embarrassed because I had this great company and I didn't have a chief operating officer.
Right,
And
right.
she had to come in and say, hey, moron, you don't have a COO and you got like 70 people. And I'm like, what's a COO again?
Right,
And
right.
she's like, I'm not going to come back next month unless you have a COO. We got to find that person. Like, that's pathetic, Craig.
Yeah.
So, it's like not knowing what a left tackle is. So that's
Right.
brilliant of the EOS people.
Yeah, that was a good way to put it, comparing it to like the football structure. So Mike is going to be specifically talking about planning, implementing, and redefining social media strategies. So for his speech, would you say that he's mainly going to be focusing on social media
I think he is.
planning behind that?
Yeah, and the reason we did that is because a lot of the feedback last year is that marketing is such a broad topic.
Mm-hmm.
And instead of lightly touching on so many little things that we do, which we could do and he has done, we wanted to go a little nitty gritty on just the initial stages. Like, there's some lawyers who do other seminars like Ali Awad in Atlanta who do a really great job on social media, who gives presentations mostly based on social media. And we thought we'd like to incorporate something like that into our seminar. So Mike's going to specifically get to the nuts and bolts of how to just start your social media campaign. And that's what we did. And we only did this about 4 years ago, to really begin a social media campaign and to try to be able to measure an ROI on that, which is very difficult. But it's part of an overall branding. So he's going to speak about social media as it relates to an overall branding theme.
That's
I
awesome.
feel like you could do a whole day just on the marketing alone. I mean, you just listed off how many different
we could do a week. Our firm could do a week on marketing.
Easy. He's a marketing guru. And Jules, really quick, did you hear the words he used? So Jules and I were having a conversation on my way into the office. We often speak. I speak to her from the car on the way in. We go through some marketing stuff. And what was the word I used that Craig used where he was 3 years ago? Disjointed? Did that word come up today?
Yeah, so, it reminds me of where we are right now. A little bit.
And so, but what's interesting is Craig is telling his story of evolution at the 7-figure attorney thing. And what's beautiful about it is every time I've ever left, I've had a different concept of, okay, we're now going here based upon what I just learned at Craig's thing, based upon what I learned about myself at Craig's thing and how I might be the choke point. And actually, I got myself out of the marketing silo and hired a fractional CMO. I went fractional first because of the level that I'm at.
But it's going to really help us get everything together.
And a lot of that is based on every time I go to your 7-figure attorney seminar or John Fisher's mastermind, and especially when they're back to back, being in the room with you or other players that we know, I can see what the future requires and have access to that and have dinner with you. And I think the last time we were at it, Jules was with us. We came to dinner with you, Mike Wells, and the people from your team. So the benefit of Jules seeing it, me seeing it, and all of our friends that we're at dinner with, it's just, there's nothing that brings that much value as what you're delivering, right? Just doing those dinners and the networking event that you do and just getting in a peek at your playbook is worth what you charge. And I know the price went up a little bit this year, but it's just an unbelievable delivery of value for the price you charge. I forget what it is now, how much it is. Jules, you could.
Yeah, it's up to $75,000 a day. I'm just kidding. It's $1,299 for the day. It's not bad.
Right. And then with the code, it takes off like $100 or $200, whatever it is. But just, you deliver so much value. And how many people are you up to now in terms of what it looks like right now for March?
It's going to be anywhere between 50 and 100, probably. I think we'll get close to 100. Last year in Manhattan, or where were we? Atlanta. Manhattan, I don't remember. Atlanta, we're like at 80 firms.
Okay.
A lot of people now are starting to bring either their COO or their marketing director, which is really bright, because it's really tough for an entrepreneur to go and take 10 pages of notes and go back and be all enthusiastic to the people back doing the work. And they're like, yeah, it looks like he just came home from a conference again. I got a lot of crap to do. But if they're also inspired because they're there, then it really helps with the implementation. So we're encouraging people to bring their either their office manager, CMO, COO, whatever they have to implement.
Yeah, and I've done that, right? I've done that with Jules has been at your 7-figure attorney thing. And it's always, we come back with pages and pages of ideas, notes, and a picture of what the future will look like.
Well, I think, as you said, it's the only seminar that I'm aware of where it's a law firm opening the hood to the car and showing you all the internal workings from one law firm. So
Okay.
usually you go to a seminar and there's lots of great speakers, but there's no coherent, unified theme. And at mine, you're hearing about the same law firm, different functions and people from the same law firm talking in unison about how they do it for one company. So you can look at a lot of different cars and how each engine works, and that's great. But what if you get to see the entire car and how the whole car works?
Right. And I'll go through why you made that choice, but I wanted to circle back to one other issue. You have a special guest coming this year that I've never heard speaking. I've met her. And you brought up the topic with Mike Wells, like, hey, we should date. So your wife, Colleen, is speaking, and she's speaking on the topic of view from the home front and why your identity as a provider is bullshit, right?
Yes.
So
talking about fear, this is the scariest seminar I've ever given, because I told my wife, you have complete authority to tell the truth and shit all over me as a husband and as a father, and the opportunity cost that comes with being a serial entrepreneur. And I said, look, I'm in my mid-50s, and my workaholism has had its cost on my wife and my kids. And for the people in the room that may be in their 30s or 40s or whatever age, there are things that I would have done differently. There are things that I would encourage people to do the same that I did. And my wife is the best person to talk about that because she lived it with me. And we're empty nesters now. Our kids are out of the house. And we've found areas of our lives in the past where both of us could have done things a little different. And now we're seeing how it plays out when the kids are gone and reconnecting with your spouse. So some of the things she's going to talk about are some cautionary tales of things you should avoid. And now some of the tools we've used over the last 20 years in keeping our marriage sane and happy, and some of the ways we've failed and some of the ways we've succeeded, and some of our plans from now on, which are beautiful because we do a lot of work together on ourselves as a couple and as parents. And I've never heard of a seminar where the lead speaker lets his spouse get up and talk about how her or his life has been as a result of being married, the big honcho, so to speak. So she's going to talk about her husband's alleged wisdom, as she calls it, which I think is a great term, and the cost on the family of being too heavily weighted either towards family, which is possible, or being too heavily weighted towards work, which is what most of us are.
Again, because I'm not going to be there, I got to get a hold of the videos because this is something that's a common thread. I'm in my 50s as well. And people do not realize the toll of entrepreneurship on the family, right? Because if you're happily married and you're working at your marriage enough, typically your spouse will basically sign off on everything you want to do, right? They trust you implicitly. They've seen you run your business. They know that you're doing it for decades now. But the toll, the unspoken or undiscussed toll of the sleepless nights, the stress, the sheer blinder focus, laser-like focus that certain entrepreneurs have. I know I have it. I know you have it, Craig. That toll it takes on your wife, your kids. So I think that's actually a great service to provide because how many firm owners, let's talk about law firm owners, are divorced? Right? There's so many people that are super successful financially, miserable because they're divorced. They see their kids on a part-time basis or they're estranged from their families. And so I think that's a really interesting idea. What actually brought that to your mind to say, hey, I'm going to ask Colleen to speak?
Well, my wife and I, I'm not ashamed to say we've been in life coaching. We've been in couples coaching. We've been in therapy. We work a lot on ourselves. And one of the parts of working on yourself is working on your relationship with your significant other and your children. And as we were getting closer to empty nest, we started to talk about what was our why as a couple. And through Atticus, we went to a couples workshop and we started to try to define our next 20 years and have some joint goals and realize that some of our goals were different and some of them were similar. And then we started to talk about identity. And I realized to my dismay that my identity was thus a provider. And we really keyed in on that term because what us entrepreneurs do as an excuse to our wives or our husbands and our kids is, well, I make the money so you guys have the luxury of having a nice house or a nice college or a nice private school or a nice car, nice clothes, blah, blah, blah. And our spouse buys that bullshit. And they'll give up time, they'll give up connection, they'll give up evenings because they buy the argument that we are a provider. But if you are just a provider and you say, I'm doing this for my kids, I'm doing this for my wife, you are going one level deep in your life and you are missing out on so many levels of being. And that's really unfortunate. And it took me a while to develop personally and emotionally and through mindfulness to realize that that's a bunch of garbage, that you're a provider. It's garbage. And it took me and my wife a lot of time to explore that topic. And then we said, hey, if we're struggling with this, every other law firm entrepreneur has got to be struggling with this. So why don't we share our struggle and talk about where we failed and where we've succeeded and maybe some tools that we found that would help others. So if we can save people from getting divorced, save people from having their kids get on drugs, be promiscuous, make poor choices of mates based on how they were parented, what a wonderful service that is in addition to helping people run a good business.
And it's also just really holistic, because the one thing that a friend of ours, Neil Goldstein, said to me over lunch, we were at lunch, and he's like, you know what is not on any headstone in a cemetery? Your net worth. I think that's a really self-aware thing to do in terms of the agenda. And I met your wife. She's lovely. And I don't think she's afraid to voice her truth in terms of how she sees things. I know she has a background in journalism, and I believe she was actually a public figure, right?
She was an anchorwoman for the news, so she's a better speaker than I am.
Which is awesome, because you're a great speaker. And I think that she could bring a level of richness and realness to this seminar that I haven't seen before in any other seminar that I've been to. So I think that that was a brilliant move, and also really vulnerable of you to do, because you're kind of giving her license to really tell it like it is. So I think that that's special in what you're doing. I think that's awesome.
Yeah, she's actually, as we've gone through her preparation for this, she's actually asked me permission as to whether she could tell a couple of stories about some struggles we had. And I'm honored that we're collaborating together to make sure that her speech is authentic and her speech is vulnerable, and that it's going to be meaningful and land on people.
Yeah, so it's real value, because you see this both in online communities in general, is that people value authenticity, right? So if somebody comes up there and like, life with Craig is awesome, it's all unicorns, rainbows, and butterflies, that's not the reality of being married to an entrepreneur. It's just not. And I know that really well, because I observe my wife and I'm very candid about my shortcomings. So I think that that's going to be a very special section. I think that's pretty brave of you to do, and also of her to step up. We joke around about it all the time. Like, do they really want to do that? But I think that it gives her a voice, a role in what you've built, because it's clearly there. Nobody gets to where you are without the support of their family.
Yeah, well, we were looking at our joint bucket lists, and one of mine always was to start giving seminars and present. And I didn't realize that on her bucket list a few years ago was give a TED Talk. Uh-huh. And we converted that, and she's not going to give a TED Talk, but she's going to give a TED Talk presentation at my seminar. So it was cool that I got to satisfy one of her bucket list items by having her speak, and she's excited about it. So we're really looking forward to her being the fourth speaker.
That's awesome. So we can start to bring everything to a close. But the other things that you're going over, and I'm kicking myself. I was like, should I cancel my trip out to San Diego to go to this? But, the 5 stages of a law firm growth, you also personally are going to be talking about that, compensating and incentives for lawyers and team, which I've seen you do this a number of times. It's always inspirational, and I always come back with great ideas, right? I think actually, Jules, you could say thank you to Craig, because he sent me his KPIs and incentives for marketing after the last seminar. And that's what's resulted in us sitting down to do your incentive plan and your KPIs. So you could thank Craig personally for that.
Thank you, Craig. We actually did mention you.
Good.
Yeah.
Great. Well,
it's interesting.
It's funny because I tend to repeat that. And a lot of people are like, oh, you're going to go over the same stuff. But at my firm, we keep growing the complexity and the level of everything. So this year, we finally finished KPIs for all non-legal staff, because we have 30 or 35 non-legal staff, including marketing and intake and administration, finance, reception, office services, technology. These are all non-legal departments. And it's hard because they don't have benchmarks necessarily. They don't have, send out 23 demand letters or make a certain amount of money. So it's hard to come up with non-legal KPIs. So one of my rocks in EOS last year was to have every single employee have a KPI-based quarterly incentive program. Every single employee. So this year is going to be a little different, because I'm going to be talking about KPI-based incentive programs for non-legal, which I've struggled with the last 10 years. So now we're getting to a point where we're able to do it. And so every single employee in my company now has incentives. and it's going to cost me a couple $100,000 for the year.
Right.
Now, people are like, are you kidding me? You pay people to do their jobs, an extra couple $100,000? And I'm like, yeah, but I want to have the same North Star. I want them to know what I want to consider their successful quarter. So if Jules hits these 5 benchmarks, then I'm happy. Jules knows those 5 benchmarks on marketing, so she's happy, and she gets a check at the end of the quarter because we're all happy. Right. So that's having a unified, everybody rowing in the same direction, which is what EOS is all about. So the fact that I spent literally this year, we budgeted over $200,000 for staff KPIs, and that doesn't even include C-level directors and lawyers. That's not even including lawyers. Is like crazy. But if all of them hit their KPIs, the ROI on that $200,000 will be a 5x.
Right. That's what I was just going to say. There's a rationale to it, right? And for people that are new to the incentive space, there's a difference between a gift and incentive. So if your average growth in your silo is, or in your practice is, let's say 30% a year, well, some measure of everything is baked into that salary wise. But so there might be an incentive of, at the 40% mark, because you're going above and beyond, right? That's where the rationale is to try to build what you said, Craig, which is you want them focused on what you're focused on, the lead measures that then produce the lag measures, which is the revenue goals, right? Or it might be other different goals for the different departments. But there's a lot of non-understanding in the space because not a lot of law firms do it. I mean, I just spent 9 hours on one department's KPIs and incentives. It's a tremendous job to do. It's very complex. Getting it right is difficult. And what people have to understand too is there's a certain level that it's always an experiment, right? It's adjustable. You have to be willing to adjust it. You want people to feel that you're fair. And we don't always get it right the first time, the second time, the third time, right? Nope. So listen, what you have built in this 7-figure mastermind is truly, truly, really admirable. I'm proud of what you've done. I've been at almost every one from the very beginning. I think you're on the 8th one now? Is this the 8th one?
Yeah, probably the 8th one.
Yeah. I come back every year and I passed the 7-figure mark probably 10 years ago, but I want to be at the 8-figure mark. So what I do is I kind of take everything you're doing and I say, okay, what is the scale I need to adapt for the level that I'm at the multiple 7-figure mark, right? And so there's something for everybody. If you're breaking 6 figures, and it's not really confined to just personal injury. Right now, there are criminal practices like there's a guy I'm having on the show, Adam Rossin. He's building a scaled criminal practice. Bill Umansky, same thing. He's building a scaled multiple silo, criminal defense and PI practice. So there's something for everybody at your 7-figure attorney seminar. And what I love about it when it's back to back with John Fisher's mastermind is it's completely different, right? You go to John Fisher's with 2 or 3 stuck points and then you're in the hot seat for a half an hour and you come away with answers, right? So there's different things to be gleaned from both, but I think it really makes a super powerful 2-day combination of conferences, all for less than $2,500. I don't know what John's price is this year either. I don't know if it's gone up, but it's all for less than $2,500. Where are you going to get that kind of value?
Yeah, there's such different seminars, but they're both so excellent in their structure that they provide different kinds of experiences. It's like going with a friend to a hockey game one day and a football game the next day. It's just a great weekend, right? You get to watch 2 different sports, but you're with your buddies each time, It's just it's a great couple of days.
And you're nationwide networking, right? You're literally at this point pulling from people all over the country. And then the people that are attending are now able to cross-pollinate their marketing with people in other states and cities, which I love. I love that aspect of it too.
I think that's fantastic. I mean, I've made so many friends. And, to me, like we talk about in Atticus, Tom, if you're in a club that likes chess, you feel awesome because all your friends share the love of chess. And we all love our communities, right? Well, if you're in a group of business-minded lawyers, it's like being in a chess club. It's like all these people love the same thing you're into. And what better home is there for a person than in a group of like-minded individuals? So I get so much richness. And you said you're a mastermind junkie, so am I. And it's not just because of the knowledge. It's because we all want to matter. And when you're in a group of people who have a similar love, whether it's tennis or chess or anything, My wife's into ghost hunting. I mean, she goes on ghost hunting adventures
Really?
across the country,
That's funny.
which is so cool. And I'm like, I'm not going. But she goes and she meets all these people and she doesn't even believe in ghosts. She just loves the community of people who like going to these things. So
That's awesome.
the masterminds I go to, it's the same thing. I just love being with folks who share a common goal and a common passion. And to me, that's why I love hanging out at groups like this.
Yeah, but it's building, and I kind of try to talk about this when people ask me about my marketing plans. It builds a scalable referral-based marketing that you don't really get from like your local BNI or LaTips, right? You're in a room of business lawyers that build out business systems. And a lot of those systems incorporate referrals of personal injury cases to New York law firms or to Palm Beach County law firms, right?
Absolutely.
So there's a business component to it. I mean, I get business from all over the country now.
Yeah, I give your name out all the time. You give my name out all the time.
Exactly.
I mean, if you're looking for a pure financial ROI, being at these groups is easily not just the knowledge, but the referral business. I mean, I know 5-10 lawyers from New York. I know lawyers from everywhere, and they're each different and can handle different stuff, and they get cases that refer me to. So it's all good. It's all great.
It's all good. And listen, there's a ton of miserable lawyers out there still. I'm just glad that we're not in that group, right? Because you've created a life that you love. You work at it really hard, both in your business and in your personal life, right? Like we text each other offline all the time and we joke about the way our poor spouses have to deal with our broken brains from entrepreneurship, all of that. But you really focus on what matters, both in the business and outside of the business. And I think that that's why you are where you are right now. Like you put a lot of work into it, right? So,
you and I, we pride ourselves on being lifelong learners and never being satisfied with where we are personally. And that has to go together with entrepreneurship. If you just grow business-wise and don't grow personally, it's not going to work. You have to be willing to grow on both parts of your soul. And if you can't do both, you're not going to do one successfully.
Right. And it will impact because you've seen those lawyers that have great businesses or they're successful. It might be by accident. A lot of times you can still make a lot of money. And then they go through a horrific divorce. And that's the beginning of a really bad cycle. And it impacts the business. It impacts people that work there. It impacts the finances. It impacts all of it. So I think the other thing that I love about what you're doing and John's doing and these different seminars is that you're giving back to the community. April. Okay.
So the seminar is called The 7-Figure Attorney. The website is spelled out 7-Figure Attorney. So that's like SEVEN figureattorney.com. It's on Thursday, April 11th of this year, 2024. It's at an Embassy Suites in Boston. And the link to the hotel is at the website, 7figureattorney.com. And next one, the next day, is the Mastermind Experience by John Fisher. And make sure you have to register for each seminar separately. So they're each separate seminars. We're not linked. But the hotel is the same hotel. So when you book the hotel, you get the discounted rate if you say either seminar's name. It's the same discount rate or whatever. So one hotel, 2 separate seminars. His is Friday, April 12th, 2024, minus Thursday, April 11th, 2024. And it's $1,299. And it's a full day. You get breakfast and lunch and there's we do some sponsors, but the rule, to my sponsors' dismay, the rule I established long ago that I really don't want to vary from is that no sponsors are allowed to take the stage. And they all beg for it and they say they'll pay more money. But I think time is of a premium and the sponsors have booths. And if you're interested in their services, you can go to their booth. But to me, time is of a premium in a one-day seminar. So I don't want, even though I love my sponsors, I don't want them to take up any of the reasons you're actually there, which is to hear some actionable advice. So yes, sponsors, no, you're not going to hear from them.
Right. And I love that because, Jules and I have both been at these conferences and you have too, where the sponsors are the seminar. And really, it's just one 8-hour, 16-hour sales pitch, right? And that I can't stand. But I do find tremendous value in your vendors being there because who else to add to my repertoire of vendors than somebody who's already been pre-vetted by a law firm doing multiple 8 figures with a team of people that vet them, right? Like you typically put vendors through like a 6-month vetting process where a team in your office will do an analysis and a comparative study against 3 to 5 vendors.
Yep.
And you choose from those 3 to 5 vendors as the CEO.
Correct. And I think probably 2/3 or more of the vendors there are ones I use. Actually, most of them, if not all of them, are ones that I've vetted and that we use personally. So I wouldn't bring a vendor that's unvetted to my seminar. So
yeah,
John at his seminar has 1 or 2 vendors, and that's about
right.
it. So this is not a sales pitch. As I like to say, I'm selling you nothing but knowledge, or selling you, as my wife calls, alleged wisdom.
Right.
There is no sales pitch at all. I'm not asking you for anything other than your friendship and your attention.
For the first 10 people that use the coupon code TONAP, standing for Tona Podcast, Tona P. Craig gave us that code, so we're going to use that code. It's going to give the first 10 people that use it a $100 savings on the registration. And Craig, thank you for doing that. I know that there's a bunch of lawyers that ask me about masterminds. Yours is always top of mind for me, that I'm referring to anybody that reaches out to me, whether it's on LinkedIn or on the podcast or, in phone calls or whatever. So I really want to thank you. What you're doing is extremely valuable. It shows people a different way of the practice of law, and to me, a much better way, right? Like, you could take a vacation, you could have your nights and weekends back and build it like a business, or be the practitioner that wants to be the best trial lawyer around, but then find somebody who can do the business end of it if you're looking to build past pure technician role. So thank you, Craig, for coming on.
Well, Tom, thank you. My friendship with you has been amazing on a personal and professional level. Makes my life richer. So I'm blessed to have friends like you, Tom.
Same, man. Same. I appreciate it. Jules, you good? Any questions for Craig?
Nope, that's about it. I can't wait to see these videos, though. I definitely think we're going to need to get those recordings.
I know. I'll have to show my wife Colleen's. I'll definitely have to show my wife Colleen's. So yeah, that would be awesome. When you come out with those, I think I've been in your seminars. I mean, there is no physical way to literally capture all the nuggets of wisdom that you impart, even no matter how fast you write. Even if I was to record it myself, I'm not disciplined enough to then get it transcribed, read everything, and nobody is, right? So I think that doing the video is brilliant, and I think that people will realize if they attend just the amount of value you're giving them in a one-day seminar for $12.99 or whatever the daily admission is. So I really appreciate it, man. I think you're doing something special. That's why I wanted to have you back on.
Thank you, Tom, and thank you, Jules, for your time today and for your endorsement.
All right.